Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to BIMA's Brand Purpose and Citizenship today. BIMA is the Boston Interactive Media Association, and it's New England's largest digital media-focused community, comprised of over 3,000 digital media buyers, planners, and publishers with business interests in the New England market. My name is Caitlin Dodge. I'm a BIMA board member and CEO of Think Argus. Think Argus is a minority-owned, women-led Boston-based marketing agency with a focus on strategy, world-class creative, and on telling stories of our purpose-driven clients. So I'm particularly thrilled to be introducing this conversation focused on brand purpose and citizenship today. So today our panel of experts are from Think Argus, Arnold, and Media Hub, and they will delve into how brands can excite and attract customers while staying true to their purpose, how they can ensure authenticity in their efforts, and much more. So I want to note that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared on the Chamber's YouTube page shortly after the event. So please be sure to submit your through the summit using the Q&A feature or by emailing questions to chamberprograms@bostonchamber.com. All right, I would like to welcome our speakers. First, we have Jose Nieto, who is my colleague at Think Argus. He is our Chief Strategy Officer. He is known affectionately, I think he hopes, as the professor. He leads strategic development at Think Argus, combining analytical thinking, creative know-how, and marketing insights to craft brands and campaigns that resonate with audiences and positively impact the community and achieve our client goals. An instinctive collaborator, Jose works with both the account and creative teams to keep our work on target on strategy. Also speaking on today's panel is Antonio Nunez, who is SVP Brand Strategy Director at Arnold. Antonio is an accomplished speaker, author, and communication strategist whose work in corporate storytelling has led him to work in 13 different countries, playing local, regional, and global strategy roles. He has led projects for brands include Coca-Cola, McDonald's, BMW, Danone, Johnson & Johnson, World Bank, combining the art and science of telling stories with a purpose to persuade and connect to others. And last but definitely not least, moderating the panel is Fimadas Peña, SVP Director, Diversity, Demand, and Supply for Media Hub. Fimadas focuses on driving visibility of diverse audiences by guiding and educating clients and internal teams on the business opportunities of reaching these growing and influential audiences. In particular, she is focused on driving investment equity and ensuring, as an agency, Media Hub is maximizing the media supply chain by bringing awareness and connection to diverse, owned, and targeted media partners. She is passionate about DE&I and fostering an inclusive agency culture. So I'm going to pass it over to Fimadas to lead today's discussion. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Caitlin, for that introduction. Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be moderating this panel and doing so with fellow Hispanic and Latin panelists here. So just wanted to take a moment to celebrate that and celebrate the representation here. So grateful to to share, this time with you both. And thanks everyone for joining us. So before, we get started, first, want to acknowledge just how timely this conversation is. It has felt like we've lived decades of history in a mere just, 2 years. So this conversation on brand purpose and citizenship couldn't be more topical in this climate. So without further ado, let's just jump into the basics. So, first question that we want to cover, it's what is brand purpose and citizenship, and why is it so important? And second part of that question is, how do brands authentically and ethically showcase their purpose without it feeling too forced? Which one of you? Don't jump in all at once.
You're on mute, Jose.
There we go. I can get started, and please, Antonio, just jump in. But I think one thing that sometimes it helps to define something about kind of what it's not or what it's not just it. I think sometimes people confuse brand purpose with corporate social responsibility or philanthropy or just kind of good manners or being sort of doing the right thing at a particular time. When we talk about brand purpose, what we're really talking is a brand strategy that really focus on who you are as an organization and what are you good for. defining your purpose and your, how you actually contribute not just to your customers' lives, but to, to our bettering our world, and then letting everything that you do be guided by that. So that involves how you produce the goods that you make, how you treat your, treat your employees, how you treat your customers, and certainly how you engage with society and with the issues of the day. And that's where the brand citizenship piece comes in. It's really when it goes from being about you as an organization or about you, the customers, and it turns into we as a society, how your purpose really engages with that. And ultimately, our goal is to to build, besides being good and contributing to the betterment of society, the goal ultimately is to engage our customers, to build brand loyalty, to go from being a commodity, producer to a brand that really means something to the people we engage with.
Yeah, I like that perspective. I also like Simon Sinek, that is one of the fathers of brand purpose, definition that is basically connecting the how, the what, and the why, right? And in his book, Start with the Why, basically is what's your purpose? Why are you doing what you do? Then the how you deliver what you do, and what is exactly what you are doing to contribute to society. So it's connecting those three. And I like also your observation, Jose, that sometimes there should be a brand strategy, but there are some lucky companies that for them purpose is not only a brand strategy, it's a business strategy, right? I'm thinking in Tom's when they have a business model that is 1-for-1. So from the get-go, since the inception of the business, brand purpose and company purpose, it's already baked in their business model. Some other times it's something that belongs or it's closer to the marketing team and the brand team. And then, you have quite a long journey to really align those three things together and finding a smooth narrative.
I mean, I think Tom's example is great. Warby Parker is a great example of that too, where they really integrated, the purpose into the way they do things. I would say, obviously, kind of coming from the kind of brand strategy, and brand strategy is everything. So certainly the way the decisions you make about how you run your business should be driven by your brand strategy as well, not necessarily something you put on top of that. But certainly it becomes credible when it's integrated. It's about what you do and not what you say. When your company is just stepping in when there's an issue, a big issue out there. I think it kind of goes to the second part of the question, right? Like when you just step in when there's a big issue and you just make some statements, people, especially today, it's very easy for people to take a look at your record and see what you've done. Do you treat your employees, ethically? Recently, the game company Activision, was in the news with doing some really terrible, behavior, especially towards their women employees. And a few other brands that they're saying, well, we found that reprehensible, and people quickly found a lot of evidence of what they had been, kind of terrible themselves. So it's really ultimately about having that brand purpose drive everything, including how you produce things, how you treat employees, every aspect of your brand, and then speaking out from that, foundation. That's how you do it authentically.
Yeah. And I think also sort of like it's rooted on a company's values. I mean, I think sometimes we forget, right? Behind brands, there are real humans and real people. And so what are the values that are, driving decisions, right? So I think it's important for our brand, to state what those values are and what they stand for. And that, as you mentioned, Jose, becomes like the guiding principle through which you make decisions, through which, guide the way that you behave. And in doing so, right, you're ensuring that you're behaving with consistency, authenticity, and not like performative or opportunistic, as, you just mentioned. And I think consumers, who are also humans and, real people with their own set, core values will gravitate, to those brands that they feel, they're seen by, they're identified with, and they're connected to. So I think, values also plays a big role.
Yeah, I mean, connecting your values to the customer's values is a key. And that is, I think, if I say one more thing about sort of brand purpose, kind of more globally, is that this is really not alien to the way that we think about brands or we think about business. Ultimately, we're all about meeting our customers' needs. right? It's just expanding how we talk about customer needs beyond, getting a nifty little product or making your life a little easier, and really taking it to a higher level about what is it that you're doing for them and how that connects with the way they engage with society, the way they engage with themselves, with each other, and really kind of delivering on that. So this shouldn't be something that is alien to your company. It is, at the core of what you do. It just should be thought bigger than just the immediate, I'm giving you a nice product for a reasonable price.
Yeah. Also, I'm loving the fact that it is becoming something huge and important for both sides of the coin, right? First, citizens, Femaris, as you were pointing, right? We are marketing people to talk about consumers, and I think that we should be talking about citizens. That has way more dimensions than just your dimension as consumer, and they are already asking for that. They are expecting your brand to have a purpose. Yeah, but there is a Gartner research that says that 66% of Gen Z is expecting your brand to be involved in society. And when you think even in boomers, the numbers are not that low. It's 44% of boomers are also expecting that. So this was something that citizens were asking for. And the good news is that companies and the leadership teams are listening, because again, there is another Harvard Business Review research that says that 87% of the companies in this country are actually working or already have defined their purpose. So that means, 48% of them are working on it, but they already have some sort of clue. And 39% already have defined what that is, and they are working on it. That is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Very remarkable. So so segueing to the next question, right? So sometimes, it takes a negative moment in the press, right, for brands to come out and highlight, all the good that they have done and that they're doing. What are ways that brands can showcase the good they're doing, again, organically and periodically throughout the year, not just sort of at a point in time?
Yeah, I can take this one first now, Jose. There is the Purpose Brand Power Index that identified basically 5 drivers to build brand purpose, right? The first one is your product. To Jose's point, you need to actually deliver what you're saying that you're doing. And you have Tom's, the example. Then you have progress, where you need to show that you're contributing to progress in society. I'm thinking like during the pandemic, Zoom, right? Everyone has seen the value and the enormous progress that Zoom has done, or Tesla in the car industry, in the automotive industry, huge steps to make that better. Or the planet, that is the third factor. REI, it's my favorite example, right? What are you doing for the planet? Then people and communities, my favorite example there, USAA, right? Where you see what they are doing for their communities. And then positive change, my favorite there, Nike and social justice, one of the other huge turmoils that has happened in the last couple of years together with the pandemic, right?
I think the only thing I would add, I think that's great. The only thing I would add is that, where it becomes a little sort of difficult to really, in an authentic way, really let people know what you're doing is when you're basically doing it in secret or doing it sort of, like on, in the background. And then when the need arises, you're really kind of putting it forward. It's not ultimately about really talking so much about yourself, but really involving others in what you're doing. So if you're involving customers, I think Tom's, again, it's a great example with Tom, when you're at Tom's concert or Warby Parker, when you're one of their customers, you are engaging in their purpose as you use the product, as you, make the purchase. And that is, it's open because people see it. They're seeing it in their experience with the company. So if you involve your customers, involve the citizens, that engage with you at every point of interaction, when you need to really speak up and when you need to say something, it comes across as being authentic. It comes across as being something that, already is almost like what people expect from you. Ben and Jerry's is a great example for me. It's like they're, we've heard them so many times speak about their values, who they are. They're constantly doing so. They're constantly involving their customers in the way they talk about it. Even the name of some of their flavors are really connected to really their purpose. Now, when they speak about issues like Black Lives Matter, you buy it. Why? Because you know that's what you know from them. That's what they're about. You know that they are true to those values, and it just doesn't seem to come out of left field.
Yeah, no, that's great. And even, talking about sort of those negative moments, like, for those brands that, do come out and have to highlight sort of what they've done, or, it's a learning moment, right? So it's a moment of introspection and a moment sort of to kind of, do a step change, make changes. And, I think it's important in order to come off, organically and have this be sustained over time is, 2020 was really a transformative year, but, it's important that, brands just keep pushing and continue to be persistent in that goal. Like, so you've learned, from your mistakes, you're making change. And so how are you keeping that up? Keeping that going and pledging, that forward. And it becomes sort of foundational to the way you operate. So I think that's how you show up sort of organically and in that, consistent way over time. Even if, there was a misstep. I mean, I think, there's so much power in acknowledging like, yes, we haven't been doing this right. And, this is our action plan moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes, Femaris, I think that is not easy, right? Especially in those companies that have a very divided the brand versus the user experience and the customer journey, right? And sometimes they're completely different teams, and you have the brand people wanting something, and then the UX people saying, wait, I want frictionless, I want easy, I want simple, and that constant dialogue that sometimes becomes a quarrel, right? So the challenge here is how to connect that, because you need to experience that purpose in every touch point that you have, in any interaction that you have with that company. And that company can be, top level sending messages about society and social justice, but then you are in front of a cash register and the clerk is saying, I'm exhausted, I'm really poorly paid, and I hate this company. And that is a real touch point, right? Beyond the narrative that it's a lofty thing that suddenly is not landing in the same way. So connecting those two to me is a real challenge. And it is true that it's a journey, unless, your company was created already with the purpose as a business model.
Right. I mean, it's funny. A lot of the work we do is for organizations that are very, already purpose driven, because of, they define who they are on, based on causes or based on, issues that they deal with. The Department of Public Health doesn't have to, be really tell anybody what their purpose is. It's clear what they do. But I think where organizations really bring their purpose into the core of how they define their products, for example, or what they do, they can achieve similar results. Like Apple, I think, is a great example where you have privacy baked in to everything that they do at the product level, at the way they engage with the customers. So when there's a crisis, like they've had some issues, like, Siri was, there's some messages coming for Siri that were being, recorded. When they say, look, this was unintentional, we didn't mean to do this, and we're going to correct it, people believe it. It doesn't damage their brand. It becomes really, really integral to the crisis communications. It's like, look, you guys know us, and you know that we screwed up. Like that's the first one. Like, we screwed up. This is not the way you expect from us, and we're gonna do better. But you buy it because everything that they do has been about that up to that point.
Yeah, there's credibility there.
By the way, Femaris and Jose, what did you think about Tim Cook wearing the Ukrainian flag? A couple of days ago in their peak performance event. What do you think about that?
I mean, for me, it's like right now this become a little bit of table stakes, which is really kind of what, to me, where, I admire Apple, and I think that they're genuine and that they're speaking, truthfully when they put those sentiments out. But it's kind of what I expect from a big company. I mean, right now, Apple is, it is the large, sometimes it trades in, but the largest company, by capitalization in the world. So they need to speak something about the big issue that the world is facing. Like, they have no other choice. I don't know necessarily like they're, defending sort of freedom and, it's not necessarily part of their, core to the core, but in a way it is, because they're about, people finding their potential, right? And they're about people being able to express themselves. And, I think what Ukrainians experience speaks directly to that. And I think they can make very easily put together messaging that really speaks to that as well. And I can come across credibly. I mean, the one that I really admire, we were talking about this when we met before, like Airbnb, seeing an organic situation where people were using Airbnb to send money, to just book travel they were not planning to make in order to get money to the people who needed it. And then immediately stepping in and saying, we're cutting our fees. We're not taking any fees from any of that. That to me, that's a beautiful, engagement with brand purpose. Like that's like, it's natural. It proceeds from a really truthful place. And it was about doing something, not about talking about it. It was great. And that's exactly what I think we'll hope to see from people.
Yeah. I agree. It's table stakes right now. I think there's no shortage of brands, whether you have taken a stand before, or not, everybody's responding. And I think that's great, and it's showing some unity. So, the more brands that come along and sort of, make a statement and, an impact, on the economy for the good, the better, right? I think everybody's, fighting for freedom and rejecting, what's happening. So moving on to the next question. So there's an aspect of, stating your brand purpose and mission and your values is that, there could be vulnerability seen in that, right? So how would you react or respond to consumers, who disagree, right, with the brand views or mission? Like, is it worth at times to stand behind a purpose, a mission, your values, and be willing to lose some customers versus having to change perspectives? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I'll jump in first on this one. I mean, I think clearly if you're changing your values because people are complaining about them, they're not real values. And certainly you lose all credibility as certainly from a brand purpose perspective. Seth Godin, when he writes about, marketing, he says that, your goal should be to market to the minimum viable market that you can market to, the smallest viable market that really will become your biggest fans. They're the ones who are really going to become your ambassadors moving forward. So that involves making choices sometimes, and those choices will alienate some people. We live in polarizing times. And that's really no way to avoid that. Some people are going to get, pissed off about your stance. And you have to treat people with respect, right? You have to say, look, we get where you're coming from, but this is who we are. And you wouldn't, certainly integrity matters to us. And we're going to be standing by our values. Right now, people are questioning Florida, with the, laws, the don't say gay laws, we're asking Disney to step in and they say something clear about their position there. And they're being hemming and hawing a little bit because they're afraid they're going to lose some customers. And it's like, that makes them lose brand value, especially for the people who, even though they're major corporations, often see them as being a force for good. I think that you got to stand by your values and really, again, you may lose some people, but you're going to strengthen your relationship with the people who care for you, who really already your fans.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think that the key word here is polarization, right? If you are dealing with a topic, we were talking about the Ukraine invasion, right? And the reality is that one, although it can be tough to participate in that conversation and put your money where your mouth is, the truth is that most people are defending the Ukrainian people and thinking that Russia did a very wrong move. So that one is not creating polarization. But I'm thinking, for example, in the middle of the Trump era, when I went to buy a Patagonia shirt and I saw that in the label, you had one little sentence saying, vote the assholes out. Sorry pardon for my French. But, it was a very bold way to say in your own product, probably in the most visible part of your product, that you were taking a side in that situation and in that context. And I agree that if your taking a side is not posturing, and it's aligned with what you have been doing in the past, right? Then suddenly it feels natural. And if you know your citizens, not your customers, if you go beyond just understanding the relationship that they have with your category, and you understand what are their moral politics, what are they voting, what do they think about the planet, what do they think about social justice, et cetera, et cetera. If you think that marketing is becoming increasingly political, and you need to think as a political strategist, not only as a marketeer, right? You need to understand both dimensions of that reality. Then when you really take a side, if it's consistent with your trajectory, people will understand that. And I'm thinking now, Nike and Kaepernick, right? Again, a very polarizing thing. Many people, even progressive people politically, saying, I don't like that. You need to respect the national anthem, right? So extremely polarizing. And many people, including Fox News, they said, oh, this is going to be a downfall for Nike, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you know what? That was, 163 millions in earned media, 6 billions in value increase for the brand. It was, a historical record for them, and 31% boost in sales. So sometimes, sacrificing and knowing your audience and your citizens really pays off.
Yeah, 100%. That's like an amazing example. And, people were burning Nikes left and right, yet sales, still soared. So in terms of brand citizenship, we know it's a journey. We've talked about it's a journey. It's a long game. You have to be committed. And with society changing, day by day, how can brands think ahead, to pivot with constant change, but also staying dedicated to its current purpose? What do you think about that?
Well, to me, one thing is you need to be thinking into things. A purpose is very sensible to culture. And it is a journey, and it was a journey because sometimes, as we have mentioned before, right, it was a transformation that it was originated in the marketing team and then spread little by little into HR and into many other departments within big companies. So it was a journey. Now, the speed can be extremely fast. And my favorite example there is the pharmaceutical companies. They were the pure evil forever in any purpose index that you can check. They were really, ranking very low. And suddenly, hits a pandemic and they are number one now because people have realized in just a couple of years that they behave differently because of the pandemic, that they made their sacrifices and that they really commit with the situation. So what I like is if you are committed to that, sometimes it's a journey that can last 3 months and you have flipped the situation. It's a 360 move that you can get. And also, for this very same reason, for how sensitive is purpose to culture and the cultural context, it can be the opposite way, right? I'm thinking now Pepsi with Kendall Jenner and that fiasco where, they were trying to jump in a subject in social justice and the police brutality and things like that. That is like, wait a minute, you have never said a word about this. And you are using a celebrity that is not precisely the poster child of being politically involved, yada, yada, yada. So for the same reason, you can also go south very quickly when you are dealing with purpose. It's a very sensitive issue.
Where, when you asked, share this question, the word pivot was kind of an interesting one because, ideally you're not pivoting, really, you're adapting. So you're taking a established core identity, a core purpose. Your brand. What are you good for? Really, it stays constant. That doesn't change. But you adapt it, you connect it, you extrapolate from it to address the issues of the day. I mean, one great example for me is Gillette, where they have always been about sort of about the definitions of masculinity, about who you are. I mean, obviously they had women's products as well, but especially for the male products, very connected to ideas of masculinity. They did two things. over the last few years. One, they did an advertising that questioned, redefined the notion of masculinity, and they got flack for some of these, but I think ultimately it's for the benefit of the brand. They really kind of put out a message. It's like, let's redefine what masculinity is about. This is, in light, particularly the Me Too movement. And what does it mean to be a man? It's not what, being a sports star. It means being respectful, being, somebody who cares for others, somebody who can share their emotions, all these different things that define what a man is. And then they took it further, and they really had a really beautiful spot with a father with the transitioning youth kind of having their first shave. And again, this is an issue that was, certainly new to them. They were engaging with it for the first time. It's a new societal priority. However, they brought it to their purpose. They brought it to what they're about, and connected it very clearly who they are. And it just made sense. It was a beautiful spot that did not feel imposed. It didn't feel like it was a new idea that we're bringing here. It's just a natural extension of it. So I think if you know who you are, if you have clarity about what you're about, you can, quote unquote, pivot, you can adapt, you can extend, and do so from a place of a strong foundation. And I think it will be credible. And I think you can, stay in touch with culture and with society as changes happen.
Yeah.
And I would add to that. Sorry, Damaris, go ahead. No, and I would add. And I would add to Jose's point of being very attuned with culture, also monitoring your purpose perception. There are tools to do this, so you can constantly know how you are doing and how the cultural context is impacting the way that you're ranking.
Yeah, no, definitely. I was going to say to the point of pivoting. I think sometimes as society changes, it's also could be looked at as could be said as it can accelerate, right, your efforts. So, one example, and I bring one that's kind of closest to me is, one of our clients, Ulta Beauty, who started their journey in creating more inclusive work, within creative, and years before 2020. And of course, once 2020 hit, right, there was this effort to just accelerate that even more and make commitments, to double their assortment of Black-owned brands, to join the Pledge for 15, which is encouraging retailers to pledge to at least 50% of their shelf space to Black-owned businesses. And then fast forward to 2022, they're making a $50 million commitment towards DEI. So it's, and it kind of goes back to what Jose, you were saying, like, your values, will continue to be sort of that compass that you ultimately, follow and sort of act upon and becomes your filter for how you behave. And of course, in times of change, sometimes that can be an accelerator, towards those efforts. So the next question is, should brands back consumers when they demand they speak on current societal issues? I know we've talked a little bit about this. Is it ever too much when brands take positions on multiple causes? So I know, Antonio, you referenced some research. I've definitely seen, the Edelman, trust parameter was quoted, multiple times in 2020. And their 2021 study, showed that, consumers now looking at, institutions trust businesses more than they do government or media. And with that, 86% of people do expect CEOs to publicly speak out on one or more, societal issues. That's up from 54% in, last year. So yes, what do you think about it? Is there a moral obligation? I kind of think back, as you were saying, Antonio, I think maybe brands should now staff, political strategists in their team, to just help navigate this ever-changing world and expectation that's growing among consumers.
You want to jump in on that one, or should I?
You go, Jose.
So, I think that a lot of this has to do with scale. And I think that when people talk about expectations they have for brands, they're really often talking about very large brands. And I think that we see the large brands as having such an impact in the way we live. They're so present in every aspect of our lives, Google, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, that you expect them to step in when world situations happen, when, there are issues, ethical issues or moral issues. We expect them to say something about it because they're such a, as you would expect anybody who has power in society to really have a stance and to be able to really help make things better. It's almost like the amount of power you have. I think when it comes to smaller companies, like companies that are more localized, I think it's ultimately about their community and seeing what are the things that really matter to the people around it. You may have people who have a lot of different things, but what do the people in your community care about? What are they really passionate about? What's really driving them? And really making sure that you're connecting with your community in the way that you really speak out on the issues that you select. Again, there may be some ones that are table stakes, as we were saying, like you have to say something about it. I mean, you have to say something about the pandemic. You have to say something about Ukraine. You have to say something about Black Lives Matter. I mean, those are things that are you would be not seen as human if you didn't have an emotional reaction to these issues. But when it comes beyond those really huge ones that everybody's talking about, I think you need to be selective based on the community that you serve and the community that you're a part of, and making sure that people within the community see you as somebody who's really concerned about the same things that they're concerned about. And again, that some of that, involves making some choices. Some things you're going to talk about, some things you won't. Because if you talk about everything, you don't sound credible in anything. So you do need to make some choices.
Yeah, I agree with Jose. I think that the key thing is being selective. And we know that if we only do the listening, there will always be people wanting you to speak about every single thing on earth. And, a CEO, it's not a politician in campaign, kissing kids at food markets, right? That is not the role. And if you think that you can do that, you are wrong. Not even politicians can do that. You cannot be talking about everything and anything everywhere. That is extremely risky. So even if you have consumers asking you to speak out and use your platform as a company and as a CEO, you need to be selective and understand that the minute that you are participating in a conversation, you are also shining a light in your own organization on both the good things, but also the bad things, the contradictions that you might be having internally as a company. So you cannot be every single day on the media, even if your community, even if your stakeholders are asking you to do so. It's extremely risky. So you need to be selective and say, okay, which ones are the ones that where we have the credibility and also the permission to speak about, and which ones, it's something that maybe you can do, as a particular citizen, and you can be the CEO and say, today I'm going to do this little thing, but it's not my place to talk about that. That is, to me, one of the smart ways that Tim Cook did with Ukraine. He didn't even mention anything, but to many of us, it was clear that himself personally was taking a side. But he was cautious in the way that, he was taking that side. And it was not about, making political discourses about Ukraine in that precise moment. But we all see that it was a personal thing. It was a personal touch that felt authentic, but it was not Apple talking in a vocal way about the issue.
And I think that that's a great example. And I think it also follows action too. They had already pulled their business out of Russia. So for him to step in with that message was like, if it's words following action is always that's a right path. As you try to kind of build your purpose brand.
Yeah. So I normally say that there are 4 principles of when to talk and when not to talk. The first one is clarity, right? Which is, people knows you for this. You need to be clear where you stand for one thing or another. The second, it's action. You need to do things, as Jose was mentioning. Tim Cook already did something prior to talking about that. Then you need to prove that you have a societal stand, that you're not thinking only your shareholders and money. You need to have proof that you care about society and all your stakeholders. And then you have a story to tell. You have to build a narrative. You cannot be, you need to be consistent. You cannot be talking about 4 different chapters every 5 seconds in every single channel or platform, because it will be a very confusing story. So you also need to be aware that you're building a narrative. So those 4 to me are the key factors when deciding participating in a social conversation or not.
That's great.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Thinking of it as a story that you're telling. That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah. I love the notion of self-awareness too, right? Like look inside and just see, do I even have a right to kind of step in here? I think that's very powerful. So I love this next question. What are some ways that your clients have engaged with their customers to showcase their purpose and stand behind a cause? And has has this been amplified during the pandemic?
Yeah, so in the past, I've worked for Unilever, and Unilever clearly is one of the pioneers of brand purpose. I think that in a way they have built the toolkits and the frameworks to actually action a brand purpose in a company, and it's a very committed company with this topic of sustainable living brands. And then another one that is very close to my heart is Cox Communication, that it's an Arnold client, and they have a very surgical way to operate, which is they identify in a cultural context a population that is in need, and then try to help. And they have done many different things in many different aspects, but my favorite during the pandemic was the One Call a Day initiative, in which every single employee committed to make a call to a senior person during the pandemic, because they identified the emotional isolation that especially elderly people were living during the pandemic. And I think that it was a very beautiful, natural, organic way to actually action your brand purpose is, if we are in an industry and we are a company that is promoting and enabling people's connections, it is very nice that we identify that some people are isolated, they are feeling alone, and and beautiful that the employees wanted to participate by every single day checking in an elderly person during the pandemic. I think that it was very touching to me.
That's great. As I think I mentioned before, a lot of our clients were kind of in the thick of it when it comes to purpose, and actually a lot of them were in the thick of it when it came to the pandemic. The Department of Public Health, we had campaigns running with them. Our campaign on mental health turned into an isolation campaign, where people were really dealing with a more immediate problem that they were having of feeling alone in this experience and not being able to connect with the people they care about, their support systems. But I do have one example of one of our clients that I in a way, they define their purpose in one way, and they're shifting the way they think about purpose based on sort of the societal moment. Arts Boston was a client of ours. We did some work. Eventually, we kind of maintained a relationship, and they brought me personally into their board. And Arts Boston is really, their goal is to support especially performing arts organizations in Boston and so kind of in the greater Boston area. They have a Boss Sticks, which is they sell tickets for without any kind of charge for these organizations. They do a lot of advocacy, but in the moment of the pandemic, 2 things happened. One, of course, that the entire performing arts world collapsed, and they had to figure out ways to be able to provide support to really people rethink the way they thought about performance. But another thing happened, which is really a more important moment in many ways. The nature of power within the arts world became very, very, very clear. How the lack of diversity, it's such a white world that especially when it comes to, museum world, or when it came to, many like the art institutions, operas, symphonies, that it became very clear societally, and I think there was a lot of pressure within, from the bottom up, of to really rethink the role of race, to rethink the role of, accessibility, of diversity within the field. And Arts Blossom has really embraced that, and I'm working with them on redefining their core, their brand strategy, their core values, their overall business strategy, to put into, bringing new audiences, bringing more diversity into the audiences of the art, and into management and into performance, make it central to who they are. And it's been it's an amazing thing, because they're also obviously struggling with a lot of, income, how they actually manage this pandemic, but they're not, they said, we can't do this and basically bring back the status quo. We can't go back to the way things used to be, because that's untenable. That simply cannot stand. We need to, they say, take a stand for bringing in, a much more diverse arts world in the greater Boston area. We need to be, an example of that too, and really set an example for the rest of the nation. So that's, incredibly encouraging to see an organization, again, already cost-based. They already had a good purpose to them, but really shifting their definition of purpose to address the moment and to really become more relevant to bigger audiences than the ones that they were, nominally serving.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I definitely wanted to take a moment to just, boast, some of our clients and some of the stuff that they've done and that they have got involved with, because I think, we're very proud. I'm thinking of, a Royal Caribbean client who, we talk about, serving your communities, right? Stepped in during the aftermath of Hurricane Irma and Maria, to, go back to Puerto Rico and the islands and bring supplies, evacuate. So, I mean, that was a moment where, they know the communities that they rely on for their business, and sort of giving back in a moment of great need. I think about, Chipotle, another one of our clients, who's, very invested in sustainability. And, their mission is, cultivating, a better world. And, they recently announced that, executive compensation is going to be tied to those sustainability goals. And I think something that's very impressive is also that they, back in 2020, within their app, they launched, their real footprint feature, which is, consumers, empowering consumers, to really see, like, based on their digital order, and based, on the ways in which the brand sources, their ingredients, like, you can see the impact right in their hands that their order has had in the environment. So I think that's, very powerful to kind of see that kind of come through, their mission come through sort of a user experience. And then the last one that I wanted to touch on, right, because we talk about missions and purpose, like, always coming, from the top down. And I feel like it can come from all different sides of the ecosystem. I come from the agency world, and, ideas can come from anywhere. So I think about our VH1 team, who, partner with, VH1 in their promotion of, Black Ink Crew, it's a tattoo, place in Brooklyn. And they partnered with a local publication, Black Owned Brooklyn. And, instead of putting money against a typical promotional, campaign, that those dollars were actually given back to about 25 Black-owned businesses that were impacted by the pandemic in Brooklyn. And so using those dollars, for good, and, obviously a lot of press was generated, and those businesses got, a lot of amplification. So it's interesting, brand purpose sort of can come, and doing good can come from anywhere. So just wanted to share, those examples. I know we're running a little bit out of time. So I think, one thing, quickly question is, what are any brands that you've seen that have really marketed their purpose well, and what has set them apart from others?
I mean, I think we mentioned a lot of them. Oh, go ahead, Antonio.
Yeah.
No. I was going to say that besides my client, Cox Communication, one of my favorite is Unilever. And you know, they have learned that the brands that embrace a sustainable living purpose grow 50% faster than some other brands in their portfolio that didn't embrace that. So one thing is about speed and growth. And then another stat that is very interesting is the Havas Meaningful Brand Based Index. That is, it's one of the metrics that we use at Arnold because we are part of Havas. And globally, the brands that embrace purpose outperform market by 206%. So we are talking about speed in terms of growth, but also outperforming the market if you do so. So I would say that Unilever for sure.
That's great. I would say, like, of ones we haven't mentioned, you mentioned REI. I wanted to, and sort of alluded Patagonia, but one of my favorite, things that Patagonia did was kind of putting their money where their, mouth is. They chose to close on Black Friday, and talk about this is like going to the heart of your business model. But basically, they say, hey, we are about enjoying the outdoors and about really getting yourself out to nature. But we're going to tell our employees to come back and work in a store, and we're going to tell our customers to come to our store on this beautiful day, beautiful time that you can really spend out in the world. And they basically made the choice to just shut down. And really let people out. So I think that's the kind of thing that where it's a combination. There's certainly a PR part aspect to that. There's a brand part of it, but I think Antonio, you were saying, it's in the way you do business. That really where your purpose shows, and everything connects beautifully because there's a core clarity. They're clear about who they are, and they understand that this behavior it's them. It's exactly who they are.
Love it. So we're going to pivot to some questions from the audience. So the first one is, what can younger employees do to push companies to consider making greater social impacts? How can they influence sort of from the bottom up?
I would say that one of the proven benefits of brand purpose is that those companies are way better at attracting talent. So I would suggest work or not work. And luckily enough, for many of us, we are in a talent shortage nowadays, and companies are really struggling to attract the right talent. And it has been demonstrated that those companies with a strong brand purpose are way more attractive for younger people. So again, one of the other benefits is not only money, is having the talent that you need and that you want, with you, part of your company community. So my suggestion would be that is decide not only where you buy and what you buy, also think about why you are working and for which company you're working, and make your choices, because you are now living a moment where companies are in very much need of your talent. So you have the power.
I think that's beautifully stated. Certainly, there is being a shift in power, and I think employees have a lot more say, mainly by choosing to work there or not work there. And certainly retention is one of the big problems that people are dealing with. I would say the only thing I would add to that is that I think that understanding the purpose of where you work, like really understanding that, having clarity about who the organization is, what the company is, and speaking that language to management, right? Instead of just saying, I want you to do this, saying, we should do it because it's who we are as an organization, and certainly the way we like people to think about of us. One of the key sort of tenets of communication is that you should be speaking the language that your audience speaks, right? And to speak to them about business, the business case for engaging in, on purpose, that, how it strengthens your brand, how it makes you really more attractive to other employees. That's all language that I think could be helpful to get across to people who are maybe perhaps don't make it a priority.
That's great. Another question from the audience is, what are ways that some small businesses that don't have, the big budgets that, how can they showcase their purpose effectively?
Yeah, I don't think that you really need big budgets. I mean, if you're a small company, if you are a local shop, let's say, I have many examples of little laundry shops that were promising their citizens that if they needed their laundry done for free because they didn't have the money during the pandemic, that they would do it as long as you had a job interview. I think I saw many examples of that, and I thought that was beautiful because the cost of that it's reasonable for a family little shop, right? Family-owned shop. So there are many ways to do this, and what I would guarantee to that small company is that your stakeholders, your clients, your employees will be watching. They are watching, and even small details, if they come from your heart, if they come from your culture and they are aligned with who you are as a small company, they will appreciate it, they will notice it, and they will celebrate it.
That's great. I just add that I think having clarity on, is extremely important, who you are and what your values are, and then engaging with your community. So the beautiful thing about smaller businesses is that they are, they belong to a community and they have people around them that really, that's the immediate benefit to, their, when you engage with purpose, they see immediate benefit. They can see what you're doing and just learn what they need, what the community needs, learn what the community is looking for, and then, work with the community to deliver it. You don't have to make grand statements here. It's not about grand, huge, movements. It's really ultimately about responding to the needs of the community day in and day out. That's the way it should be.
Yeah, I feel like that kind of answers, this next question, which is, how can corporate companies be more sincere when it comes to difficult social issues like Black Lives Matter, besides just donating money? What else can be done? And I feel like you answered that, right then and there, Jose, like, think about what does the community need and, enact on it. Would you add anything else to that?
I mean, I would just say, you have to make sure your house is in order. It starts at home. Your hiring practices, your management practices, are they driven by these? Are they shaped by these? Your values and decisions. And if they're not, then that's a lot of work you need to do first before you're out there and start making any kind of statement.
Yeah, I agree with Jose. I would add that besides aligning your ducks, right, the other thing would be involving your employees, allowing your employees to be the ones participating. Sometimes it's much better to have an employee-driven initiative than a corporate-driven initiative. And sometimes, your own employees are key for that credibility, and they can really speak volumes about who you are better than your brand. And so I think that's another thing that I would suggest: involve your employees.
That's great. And then last question, and there's two questions here, but real quick, what if a company doesn't take any sides, right? So for instance, Apple, what if they talked about wanting peace for all versus Tim Cook wearing, the Ukrainian flag? Does that make them less bold? Or does it make it seem like they're skirting the issue? Another viewer said, which I think is tied together, I think, Antonio, you had mentioned, permission to speak about something is an interesting thought. Like, what do you mean by that? So I thought those two questions combined, make sense. What do you think about that?
Yeah, what I meant by permission to talk or participate is that, even if someone asks you to participate, you need to really think if you are going to add value and be ethically responsible for your participation. So again, you cannot be that politician talking about anything, looking the spotlight and being desperate for talking about anything, even if you don't have the credibility, even if you don't have something smart or educated to say. So participating because you want to show that you're bold, that doesn't make sense in my own perspective. you need to participate when you are sure that you can add value to the community in that precise lane, in that precise topic. If not, maybe the most wise way to do it is, again, as I was saying, you can always participate in a personal way. Your employees, you can ask your employees to participate in a particular personal way, but you don't need to involve your company and your brand in every single conversation that is going on today.
There are definitely brands and companies that are all about just making money, or all about, meeting, sort of a shareholder value. That's all they do, and that's fine. That's who you are. Then don't speak about any issues. It's okay. Just shut up. But if having value certainly makes you a much more memorable brand and much more engaging brand. And I think that, I think it makes sense to then take a stand.
I'm going to jump in and take my normal approach here, which is having to cut Jose off at the end of meetings publicly. So I could have stayed and listened to this for a lot longer. It was a wonderful discussion. So thank you so much, Jimenez and Antonio and Jose. I think we should continue this some other time. Maybe we'll get another time to do this in front of everyone. But thank you for bringing your expertise, passion, insights to this. It was really wonderful. I loved listening to this conversation. So before we wrap up, though, I just want to highlight a few more upcoming virtual programming that's happening here at the Chamber. On March 22nd, the Chamber will be hosting a Government Affairs Forum with Charlie Baker. So join to hear from the Governor as he shares his insights into the state of the Commonwealth and how he envisions our economy continuing to grow. And you can register for these programs and more by visiting bostonchamber.com. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you to the panelists.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.